Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Training Guide for Virginia Childcare Providers to Navigate the COVID-19 Crisis. My name is Valerie Manu, and before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in your control panel. This webinar is being recorded. All participants are placed on mute for quality assurance. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A sessions throughout and at the end of today's presentation. With that said, I would like to turn it over now to Kathy Glazer.
Thank you, Val, and good Monday morning to everybody. I really appreciate your taking some time to join us today to better position yourselves to be a resource and a guide for childcare providers during this really uncertain and troubling era. We appreciate your leadership in doing that and your partnership in building out our bench of supporters who are able to help point childcare providers in the right direction. Today's webinar and training time together will be really in 4 blocks. First, I'll provide a few updates from the what's going on as far as we know it at the state and federal levels. Secondly, Lauren Small and Virginia Marsh will provide some information and tips on supporting providers' application for the new CCDF stimulus funds that have just come to Virginia as of last week. Third, they will be providing some information to help providers prepare for what we hope will be another block of stimulus funds coming down the pike, perhaps as soon as this week. And fourth, we'll have a section for Q&A to make sure that we're hearing your questions and responding as well as possible. So as we get started, just a quick reminder of who you are. You are our intended audience, and we're looking forward to working with you as you continue your support role with childcare providers to be able to give you some tips and equip you to help these individuals feel ready to use the guide that we've developed to make good decisions and then to act on activities and strategies that they may use to access more resources for the work that they're doing. You can move to the next slide. Thank you. And we will be referencing the guide, which is in your handout section on your control panel, as well as can be found at these 2 websites. We will be reviewing this morning the updates made to the guide just as of today. And so first, let me share again the training purpose. So first, we are going to be hearing from from Lauren and from Virginia to work with equipping providers who are still operating with guidance and tools to immediately apply for the CCDF stimulus funds that have been directed to providers remaining open to provide emergency child care for essential workers, and fully half of the $70 million block of stimulus that has come to Virginia as of last Wednesday, I believe, is pointed to providers who are remaining open and providing emergency child care. So we want to make sure that we can support these providers to tap into some funds that are available to them. Secondly, we want to help all providers be able to make careful decisions as to whether they remain open or close temporarily, and to ready them to promptly apply as approved as appropriate when and if additional federal aid arrives. And as I mentioned, we have heard rumors that it's possible that another significant block of funds may be coming forward later this week if Congress can agree and act. I want to also share the current state. I'm sure you've all heard that the EIDL and PPP, the Payroll Protection Plan dollars, are all depleted. Again, it looks like more are on the way, but even the training that we recorded last week and the guide that we had prepared is really, in some ways, obsolescent because the dollars are no longer there to apply for. We are really excited and want to be prompt about helping providers apply for now for the CCDF Virginia version of the stimulus. Third, I want to share with y'all this morning what changes we did make to the guide, and if you can pull yours out or take a peek on your screen. Just want to review briefly the few changes that were made, but important changes. We updated the guide.
Kathy, do you want me to pull it up?
I think if you can do that easily, that would be terrific. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate it. And as she's pulling it up, I'll just keep mentioning that we updated it from the original date of April the 5th to now April 20th as of today. And many of the changes were on the second page, which articulates the Virginia Department of Social Services resources. The first block is around the subsidy, and we made 3 small changes to that section. One was that the paid absence days were up to 76 days. Initially, it was for just open providers, and now it is for open and temporarily closed providers. Families will make no co-payments April 1 through June 30th, and eligibility has been extended to 6 months, not just 2. In the second block on that same page, page 2, we added the details about the stimulus section and added the rules that the state has determined for the $70 million of new funds, again, that Virginia received last week. We also included the website where you can find more information and detail on that. The first part of Lauren's and Virginia's training will focus on this block of funds. On page 3, we made a notation that the payroll protection plan and idle loan funds were depleted and that we're awaiting further congressional action. And of course, we'll update the guide and all of our training information as quickly as possible once we get more clarity on the specifics of those hopefully upcoming funds. The second part of the training today will focus on helping providers be prepared to apply for this just as soon as the dollars are approved, because we anticipate that they will be grabbed as quickly as the first block of funds. On page 5, we added a link to the letter from the Department of Social Services about licensing leniencies. And I really point that out for you to pay attention to, because I think I've never, seen anything quite like it from any of our state agencies. And I really applaud the candor and the transparency that is being used to just, indicate what are priorities right now and what are things that we can sort of look beyond to get through this moment. And then again, on page 8, we made the relevant changes to the sections about the CCDF and new stimulus dollars. I just want to ask you to remember and sort of have patience with us that much of this information is fluid, that we're in a situation that's rapidly changing and evolving. We have tried to provide information and training tools that are as up to date as possible and as quickly as possible, so that we can provide clarity, but recognize that they're moving targets. Our goal is to equip you as well as we can with information and resources for now, so that you can facilitate their providers clarity on where they can go to learn more and access resources. Just a reminder, we're not expecting you or asking you to become legal or financial experts or provide that type of advice, but to be pointers and facilitators for childcare providers. Some questions may be raised today. We all have so many questions, but we will be, pointing responses and conversation to what we can discuss today and what we've prepared in terms of the information for equipping providers. And we'll refer you with any other questions to handouts or links that are in the handout section or in the chat box. where you can find more information. And I would especially point you to the recording from Friday's webinar about the new CCDF stimulus dollars. There's a link in there to listen to that recording because there's a lot of great detail directly from Jenna and from Tara Ragland at the state level. And with that, I'm going to sincerely welcome Lauren and Virginia and thank them for all the work and help that they've been in preparing our child care partners. And we'll turn it over to Lauren now.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everyone, or maybe I should say good afternoon. This is Lauren, and then I also have my colleague Virginia on the other line. Really thankful to be here and sharing with you all what we've kind of been pulling together over the weekend. I can only just reiterate what Kathy has been saying, and I think kind of what we've been hearing for several weeks is this is fluid and we have new information. I even have new information that we got this morning. And you all are a network of TA providers across the state. We know you have really great relationships with the providers, and we really feel like it's imperative. The next few days are very crucial for ensuring that all providers have this information. And believe it or not, and I think all of you would probably agree, there are still some providers out there that aren't possibly checking emails, are busy working and doing the work, and maybe a little bit out of the loop. So I think this is our time as a community to, once again, come together and ensure that every provider, especially those that are open right now, are very much in the loop with what's going on. So our goal this morning, and I don't know if any of you were on the presentation last week, but we recognize that all of you are not financial analysts, business counselors, that we're all jumping in there to serve in the very best way that we can. And so our goal is not to overwhelm you with every single detail, but I think we've been pretty consistent in just saying we want you to know where to point people. And that you don't have to have all the answers. This guide, I think, has just been an incredible tool, and we keep improving it. And we know it's awesome because other states are grabbing it, and other industries even, because it's really simplified what could have been just an overwhelming process. And I'll be honest, it was overwhelming for me. And I do this stuff every day. And I wrapped my head around it, but I can only imagine for a lot of people, this has been an incredible amount of information. So the guide is gonna, and that's what we're gonna do, just take you through that tool again. As Kathy mentioned, we really gotta make sure everyone's up to speed on the new CCDF funding. And then we recognize that not all of them, but a lot of providers got kind of out of the loop got caught not quite prepared to jump on this disaster relief funding that came through the CARES Act. And that, I'm not gonna say it wasn't fair, but that we can now take this little bit of time. It sounds like there's going to be a new stimulus package. They're working on it. It could be potentially ready as soon as Wednesday. And so we want our guys to be ready for it and to help them as much as possible be aware of the information and the best practice to be as prepared as possible. Okay, so with that being said, hopefully you've had a chance to print out the guide or you have it up on their screen. When we talk about this guide, we broke it into 3 areas. The knowledge guide, which is a summary of all these programs. And as we pulled it up, as you saw, it has the most up-to-date summary details and highlights of each of those programs. There's a risk-benefit assessment, and that's directed towards still this. You may have some providers, again, trying to wrestle with, should I open, reopen, should I close? How do I decide, knowing that there's really no right or wrong answer? It's really about analyzing it. So that tool helps make that decision. And then the last part of the guide goes into a process that can help really look at this financially, which is again what we've been recommending is that we really do some forecasting financially so that all of our guys can come out of this on the other end still open and ready for the rebuilding phase. Everything that we're talking about, and we've been working hard to keep the website up to date. It's on my company's website, earlyeducationbusiness.com, and we're trying to make that really align with all the information we're sharing today so that you can easily get to these links and get to what you need. So the first part of the guide, the knowledge guide, talks about these three things. I'm not going to go over it. I just want you to be aware that the latest updates on the subsidy, as Kathy mentioned, are up there. We're going to go in deep in a minute on the CCD stimulus funds. All that has been updated. We were waiting for that, and so it's been rolled out. And then you're probably aware, but there's also updates with the food program, the reimbursements. And so that's, again, a place you can go to. Okay, so looking at the CCDF fund, the CARES Act Child Care Funding, what we've heard all along is that the most important, I guess, or the immediate priority is that our essential workforce, excuse me, our essential workforce have access to childcare if needed. And so ChildCareAware really stepped up and developed a new map that will show who's open and who's closed and assist parents. And then obviously we want to continue to encourage providers to keep their status updated on there, because you can start to see that it's all linking, and it's going to be a way that customers can be referred back to them. I had to take a sip of water there. Okay. With the CCDF funding, and it ended up being $70 million, and the way that they're allocating it, and what we want you all to focus on, first of all, is that half of that money is going to centers that have been able to remain open to support them with the cost of doing that. We know that they're all a lot of them are operating at less than half capacity. They have additional requirements for staffing, all these extra cleaning requirements, the 10-person role. We know that it has been a lot for them to comply and to stay open. So this funding will help those providers that have chosen to stay open. As Kathy mentioned, and I'll show it in a minute, there's a link to the webinar that VECF did on Friday with Jenna. Really great webinar going deep and explaining all the details. So today we're not going to go into every single specific detail. A lot of that was answered on the webinar, and both VECF website, we have it here in the slideshow, and also on our website you have that webinar. But they can reopen. The funding is designed to be for providers that are open April through June. A second part of that funding is for families in the Child Care Subsidy Program that will not, they won't have to make their co-payments from April to June. And then a third part is for child care providers that have closed. They can still request absent payments. So it's intended to support subsidy providers, whether they're open or closed. And then there's a fourth part of it that will get into, if needed, providing backup emergency care when needed. So that funding is open to all of really the types of our business model: licensed child day centers, religious exempt, licensed family day homes, as well as voluntarily registered family day homes. And then obviously the subsidy providers, all of them are eligible for this funding. And on this next chunk of this slide, you can see how they're calculating it. They'll get a monthly payment of $25 times half of their capacity for each week that they provide care to children. And that was what was interesting. You know, a lot of folks had questions about, you know, what if I have to close to clean, or, you know, I've had someone come, we've been impacted by the virus and we have to close for a few days to clean. Will that impact? Lots of different questions like that. And this funding is intended to support centers that are serving, you know, our emergency workforce. And if they have to close for a few days to clean, it didn't sound like that was going to impact their ability to participate. So just they have to be open in the month they're applying for. They can reopen in May and then tap into the funding in May and June. And they just have to be willing to provide care for the children of essential personnel. They can still provide care to other children. We've heard that question a lot, but they're being asked to provide priority to essential personnel. And then we know that they understand and they have to comply with these enhanced health and safety requirements. The application has been, I think, really streamlined, easy. The providers are sharing it doesn't take a long time for them to fill out. Here's the screenshot of what the application looks like. You have the website here. Again, it's on our website. It's really easy to get navigate if you go to the DSS website. And then if you have questions, we show on this slide here, ask for care. They've been really responsive and we'll get back to you with any detailed questions if somebody does have that. The webinar recording, here's the link to it. And then Anita also put it in the chat box so that you can hop on there and listen to that if you want. You know, another hour on a webinar, we're getting used to it, right? I've listened to it 4 times already, so, and she did a great job on that. Kathy, do you want to just pause for a moment and look at the chat box, or do we want to keep going?
Lauren, there is one question or one comment that was put out on the chat box, just feedback that the providers are overwhelmed with all of the emails that they're getting. And I think that's a great point as we look at the knowledge and the experience that has been put into putting this guide together. This is a resource for the technical assistance providers to forward and kind of coach their providers to refer back to this guide. And I think that will help guide their information seeking and kind of weed out through those emails for them, because this captures most of the information, if not all of the information that they're going to need.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. It will help reduce the information overload. And I agree, I understand what the person is saying. There's a lot of information out there.
And Lauren, it's Kathy. I think we don't have any other questions that have come forward besides that, which, you know, in and of itself speaks volumes. I think that one thing that we're, you know, feeling today and, you know, in this training, want to point to that there are a number of different types of concerns and issues that they need to deal with. But right now we're feeling that, you know, the most immediate thing is for providers to pay attention and tap into these stimulus dollars through Virginia. It's kind of job one today, just to make sure that they, you know, get that lifeline. Jenna and other state officials have been clear that it won't be enough to, you know, to kind of solve all problems. But I think that, you know, just the immediate thing is, you know, bringing folks up out of the mountain of emails and trying to sort through so many different competing demands to say, you know, right now, today, tomorrow, Wednesday, this is absolute top importance for accessing resources.
Thanks for bringing us all back to what's most important, Kathy. So again, yeah, this really, the next few days are pretty critical for getting this application in if they're able to apply for this childcare funding. and then getting ready for the next stimulus package of the disaster loan programs, which we'll talk about next. Actually, that's a perfect segue. So the Paycheck Protection Program and the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, affectionately called EIDL, are two programs that are currently closed. They ran out of money essentially, and Congress is in the midst of wrangling out the next stimulus package. We received an email this morning from Grace Reef, because she's right there in the mix of it, indicating that they may have it ready to roll out this week. As we mentioned to you all, we know that a lot of our providers are unsophisticated when it comes to this type of financial activity. And so I think we as a network can support them with, again, bringing it back to what's important and giving them some kind of specific next steps and things that they can do to get ready for this next round. And so just kind of following the guide, on the next section, they had summary points of, and both updated, of the PPP program, the EIDL program, and then a mention to also continuing to look, after we get these first couple of things done, for other government supports, grants, loan programs in our local communities. So as we think about getting them ready, some really, and again, in my experience has been that folks are at all different levels of sophistication. You have some business owners that you just talk to them for a minute, you give them the guide, you might explain it, and then they run with it. Then you have others that need a little more hand-holding, and then you have some that are just completely overwhelmed and need a lot more support. So some of this recommendations might be for the ones that need the most support, but we've been getting this kind of feedback. These SBA loan, particularly the PPP program, you have to apply for that if they're going to do that, and that's the Paycheck Protection Program, through your individual bank, through your preferred lender. The EIDL programs, you apply directly to the SBA. You go to the SBA website. And in a moment, I'll show you the website and the links so that it's clear where you go. But what we found with the PPP is that the banks got overwhelmed. If you think about, every industry is impacted by COVID across America. And so very quickly it became apparent that the banks were started to focus on their existing client base. And some businesses didn't have those established business banking relationships, and they were left adrift, scrambling to find a bank if they had one. Some of the banks didn't participate in SBA lending, and it was literally a run on the banks. That program wasn't even open, I think, 2 weeks, and it ran out of money. So we want to get them ready for this next round of funding. If they don't have a business banking relationship, we want them to set up a business bank account and understand the requirements of that bank, what paperwork they're going to need, and to get that submitted as soon as possible. Get in the queue. Part of that, yes.
We do have a question that I think we probably just need to speculate on based on, anecdotal, what we're hearing. But someone's wondering if someone's already applied for the payroll protection plan but haven't heard anything, do they need to reapply, or will their application automatically move forward?
So I actually called my bank this morning, and I had that exact same question. And I really challenged them to give me an update. And I got that by being very persistent, because I wanted to know, was I going to, did I have to resubmit? Which no, I didn't. Did they have a complete application, or was there any missing information? And they needed my W-2, which it wasn't in any paperwork. It just was this random thing that came up. And so I've gotten that to them. I'm in their queue. You keep hearing this. You got to get in the queue and it's ready to go. And that's what we want. We want our providers in the queue ready to go. One of the things that's been really kind of wonky about this whole process is that the SBA has not given clear guidance to the banks about what the requirements are. So what you will find is that every bank is coming up with their own requirements in terms of documentation. For the PPP, it's a payroll. It's a payroll loan. It's to cover 8 weeks of payroll. And as soon as you get the money, you've got to be ready to use it. And the goal of it is to maintain payroll on the same level as you did last year. Now, how they determine that, how they come up with the calculation, again, it's going to go back to the bank and understanding how they're going to do that, what their requirements are. But they are going to want to see historical payroll information. In a perfect world, every client out there has good records. Maybe, I was able to get my records from my payroll company, the ADP, the paychecks. I work with Payday Payroll, but they have to be able to provide that information if they're going to apply for this loan. Let's see. An element of this too that really we're not hearing a lot, but it will turn into a loan. It's a favorable loan, but if at the end of the day, after the banks do their calculation, there may be a portion of it that isn't a grant and will turn into a loan, and the clients need to be prepared for that. So we're really encouraging them to rise to a higher level of financial forecasting and to start working with tools that will enable them to do that. I'm going to pause for a minute because Virginia's on the line, and I know she wants to jump in and kind of fill in any blanks and information that I might have forgotten. Did you have anything else to add to this, Virginia?
I think just, I sat in on a webinar with on Saturday, and I'm trying to make some sense out of all the information that was given. The biggest feedback that we got, it's really important to be in communication with the specific lender because a lot of the decision making is going to be left up to them. There's some great calculators that are out there, some great guidelines on how to figure out if you're meeting the requirements. There were some concerns about the total head count. And initially when this came out, it sounded like it was total compensation, but it's looking like there's going to be an avenue that's directly linked to headcount. So I think it's really important to get the providers to check back on these resources as updates and more specific information comes available, and to make sure they're in communication with the lender. I think that's the biggest point we can drive home.
One other question, Lauren, that we'll kind of insert here. Can programs who get the payroll, who are approved for the payroll protection plan, also get the CCDBG, the Virginia stimulus money?
I'm not 100%, but my understanding that this CCDF was a separate funding stream. But I think we should get clarification just to be sure.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I know I'm hopping around a little, but you have two loan programs. You have the PPP, which we've been talking about, and getting providers ready for that. And then we're also talking about the EIDL loans, which it really goes back to the guide, and we'll have a moment to kind of walk through it. It really goes back to what their strategy is. If they're looking to reopen, to bring back staff, to get ready, that's what the PPP is intended, is to pay staff to ready the business that when the restrictions are lifted, that they're able to as well as possible get back to business. I think though there's a cautionary thing that's happening here is that I think we all recognize we may not be getting back to business at the same level. There may be a period of time of rebuilding. I'm really trying to pay attention to the trends because a lot of folks have lost their jobs and they may not be able to go right back to work, which means they may not need childcare immediately. So I think too, there's a part of this, especially with this PPP, that they have to be aware of, that when they bring people back, it's not without this strategy of after 8 weeks, now I have this huge payroll that my revenues don't support. You know, they really need to be kind of forecasting out and using that money judiciously, but very much aware that the part that doesn't fit with the calculation, you know, will turn into a loan. And I know I might be making this sound more complicated than it, and that's not my intention. To summarize, we really want them forecasting. Okay. The SBA, the EIDL loan, in both of them too, there's still traditional lending requirements. And that means that the providers need to understand that these are credit-based, that they will have to show how they're going to repay the loans. So that again means that they will have to show these cash flow projections. There's still going to be some banking requirements. I think folks got a little surprised that when they were applying for this, that the banks wanted all this documentation. But it's the EIDL has a part of it that's a grant, but it's a very small part of it. And you may have heard of it. It's the EIDL grant. So you apply for the EIDL loan, and then there's a process where a little portion of it can be turned into an immediate grant, and that's designed to give them immediate cash flow. Originally, everyone thought it was $10,000 for everyone, but we've now learned that it's $1,000 per employee. They can apply for that EIDL grant, even if they have bad credit and they know they wouldn't qualify for the disaster loan. They can still apply and obtain that immediate grant, even if their application gets declined. So, do we have any questions? Let me just pause there right now.
Nope, I think ready to move on.
Okay. Kathy, do you feel like I've covered that well enough, at least the update on the where we are?
I did. I think I would get right to the applying for the CCDF and then the working on the cash flow sheet.
Okay, so do you want me to go to, guys, this is real time. Did you want me to actually go to the application?
I think that'd be great if you're prepared to do that. I think that would be helpful for folks.
Okay. I'm gonna do that. So let's go. All right. So you should see on your screen the website. And this is the earlyeducationbusiness.com website. Up here at the top, you'll see the COVID-19 link. So that will take you to this whole section. And we have on here a link to the CARES grant. So it's right at the top of disaster recovery. And so you can link through right to the DSS website. And when you click here, right here on read more, it takes you right into their website. And if we go down here, federal, state, you have a lot of the documentation that Kathy was referring to, the announcements, the licensing waivers, the letter to providers, and then right here is the application, CARES grant application. Click on that, and then it's a fillable. I heard on the webinar, they were mentioning that folks were printing it out and then taking a picture of it and sending it to DSS, which it sounds like they'll take that, but it slows down their process. So, you know, perhaps that could be something that we help them do, is to scan it in as a PDF and send it electronically. I just think this is pretty straightforward. It's a basic application. It's literally 2 pages, 3 pages, and then they're done. There's nothing too technical about it, Kathy. It's just answering a lot of questions.
Excellent. I think this is the kind of, you know, I'm guessing, and we'll see if our folks can give us some chat in the questions box and give us some feedback. But I think this is the kind of really practical level pointers that people need. And I think, you know, just the fact that it is as simple as possible tells me that our state leaders want to make this as feasible as possible. And just remember that fully half of the 70 million in stimulus that has come to Virginia, it's actually not stimulus, but that's what they're calling it, is for supporting those providers who are remaining open with some additional funding. And so I think they want as much as the providers do to make this as simple as possible, especially because the SBA and the EIDL and the PPP are so cumbersome and very, very difficult to apply for. So I think it's, I'm really impressed and grateful that the state has tried to make this as simple as possible. Thank you for feedback, folks, that this is helpful to you.
And I think right here, you'll see here, it says, this is where folks got a little tripped up, is the W-9 request. A W-9 is just a request for your tax ID number. And we can put that on our website, but if you Google IRS W-9, it will pop right up. It's going to require, it's their tax ID number. And it will require either a social security number or an EIN number on there. We're recommending that every business set up an EIN number. It is a really simple process by filling out this, and you see it here, Form SS4. And I want to say I hope it's a quick turnaround time. I can't remember when I did mine, but it basically helps a business to start doing business with an EIN number versus their social security number. And there's many times when you have to apply for things that it asks for your, this business ID number. A lot of times your family day homes, your sole proprietors will use their social security number as their, identification number, but it's really a better best practice to just set up an EIN number. It's free, it's easy, it's a simple process, and it keeps their social security number off of all this paperwork, which limits, I think, the possibility for identity theft. They're asking for either, they're asking for the W-9 form plus a copy of the social security copy or the tax ID number. The tax ID number is the EIN number. So hopefully that's clear, and that's something practical and easy you can help them with.
Lauren, let me throw you a question and see if you can answer it, or if we need to run this down. Do providers who are permitted in Arlington, Fairfax, and City of Alexandria mark voluntarily registered?
Are they, so you have family day homes in a particular city, and are they part of that shared services? Is that?
No, these are providers. Some localities have their own kind of permits or licenses. And I'm going to guess that voluntarily registered is the right selection for those providers, but we'll look into it and see if we can make sure and give you an answer on that, Julie. Thanks, Lauren.
So I think we've covered the guide or the CCDF funding pretty thoroughly. So hopefully everyone understands that that funding is ready for them to apply for. It sounds that they've been very intentional how they figure out how it's going to be allocated. It's, but you know, and it's probably not as huge a threat that it's going to run out right away. Like they've tried to make it, kind of divvy it up so that everyone has access to it. But again, reach out to all your clients, all your programs that you work with, and this would be a time just to make sure that they are aware and that they've applied. Now let's step back to the guide, because I do want to just make sure through this webinar that you are comfortable with it, that we've at least had this overview of the tool so that you can walk providers through it comfortably to the best of your ability. So just wrapping up the knowledge guide, there was also a section on supporting staff, which highlights both of these Families First Coronavirus Response Acts, which are highlight the employer paid leave requirements. There's also a section on the unemployment benefits and the pandemic unemployment assistance. I did see an email this morning from VEC, the Virginia Employment Commission, that the pandemic unemployment program is now open for folks to apply for. And they would have to already, we just got this email this morning and Kathy was like, I don't know, we might be opening more questions than we're prepared to answer. But it is open. It wasn't open last week. We've been hearing about this extra federal unemployment assistance called the pandemic unemployment. And they would have to, first of all, an individual must have a regular traditional unemployment claim on file before they would be eligible for that. And then there's a link, and we're going to put this on the website, a link to the application to apply for it through the VEC website. It says it will not result, though, in an immediate payment of they're calling it the PUA benefits. They'll have to first establish their eligibility, and then they'll be notified. So they're kind of working through their process. There's also a student loan forgiveness, which may help some staff that have student loans. There's some benefits there, and it's highlighted in the guide. There's also a section on protecting health. I think we've all now become experts in how to maintain environments for pandemics, but this section has the guidelines, again, to reference back to. Children in COVID-19, your vulnerable populations and what that looks like. And then this has been updated, the changes in program operations. And I've talked to a few providers this last week, and we're starting to see the strain of compliance, trying to meet the demands of complying. And we have so many providers out there that don't push things to the limit. They follow every rule to the T, and they understand the importance of the health and safety standards. So I think that this is incredible that we've gotten, some leniency, and they have to do the very best job that they can. But I think we also need to remember that they're going beyond the call of duty, and we do want them to be here when this is all said and done as a viable business. And some of these requirements, and I just think it's worth a conversation, and to I don't know what the word is. I'm not going to say comfort, but to talk it through with them, and we have to have a little bit of rationality, and again, we want them to be able to stay in business at the end of the day. Okay. Kathy, do you want to just add anything else? I know that this is really a tough thing right now for providers. I took many calls last week around this.
Mhm. I mean, I think that probably in the interest of time, Lauren, we should move forward to the spreadsheets and some of your tools. I
Okay.
think we could have a whole webinar on this one, but I think for today we should get to the tools to help them prepare and plan for application for when new stimulus comes down the pike.
Okay. I know, and I didn't think I would, I thought I would be done early, and now I'm rambling. So thank you for keeping me on track. Part of the guide we have, and I mentioned it early, this risk assessment tool, and this just guides their decision-making on, again, if they're struggling with, should I reopen? Does it make sense? There's so many variables, and there's a financial variable now that we need to consider. If they reopen, they're going to have access to this nice stream of funding, and we can calculate it and put it right into the budget to see if that will also help. This risk assessment tool takes them through the intangible things to consider when opening or closing or reopening. And it's a personal choice that each center has to make. We know that there are a lot of folks, this is really serious, this virus, and they may not be comfortable with it. They have to make the best decision for this program. So I think this just helps. It's literally checking boxes, and it will help them feel more comfortable with their decision. I mentioned a few times, my company and what we've been really recommending is to get a financial forecast in place. Every one of these programs, if you really think about it, has a financial implication. And by putting that in the cash flow spreadsheet, which I'm going to show in a minute, it helps it to be less of a emotional decision. It becomes a little bit more practical based on just the information they have on hand in terms of what money is coming in and what money is going out. And we're encouraging them, if possible, to try to go a little deeper in analyzing this stuff. So it's the recommendation is obviously apply for the CCDF funding, understand, get in the queue for the disaster relief loans, and then to continue to get a forecast in place using some type of cash flow worksheet. The process is look at what's coming in, look what's going out, use the spreadsheet, get it on paper, and then if we identify any gaps, let's try to be proactive instead of someone going, I can't make payroll next week, I'm about to have a heart attack. Let's try to be proactive in linking them to the resources. And we just don't know what the need is if they can't get this stuff down on paper. So the guide has this great process, and again, took a lot of complicated stuff and put it down in one page to help them think this through. And so whether they're open or closed, we look at the second column, how much money is coming in, what does that look like? We've seen all kinds of configurations of tuition. Some folks had enough of a cushion and they're not charging families. We've just encouraged, try to capture as much revenue as possible, and that really proactive parent communication has been just hugely successful for programs to, if parents can pay, to help them capture that revenue. Along with this whole kind of forecasting what's coming in, revenue, and it would be, getting subsidy payment information into the spreadsheet and putting a dollar value on that, as well as their food program funding. And then now we can add this nice CCDF funding if they're eligible for that. And that you see just the flow chart with that decision making. The blue section is for folks that are open, and if they're closed, they still have options. It's just is a different scenario. If they're closed and they're doing these forecasting, if they may have to adjust their strategy. And I think, you know, that's something we saw, is that centers made decisions a few weeks ago and things have changed, information has changed, and it's okay to reevaluate based on the information that they have now. The last column is considerations for managing expenses. And we've just been recommending all along that they look at everywhere that they're spending money and they eliminate the non-essential, that they pare it down. And, you know, labor cost for our industry is our largest expense. Typically, we look at labor cost as a percentage of revenue, but with the forecasting we're recommending now, especially with the 10-person rule, it would be nice, it's not a deal breaker, but it would be nice if they could really analyze labor costs, you know, more detailed per person, and how much is that person going to cost me for that shift. And, you know, not to make it complicated, but, and we have that on the cash flow spreadsheet if they want. There is the capability to go deeper into their labor costs. And this slide just is an example of the spreadsheet. And again, it's on the website. It might seem a little overwhelming at first, but there are formulas in there that we've done and we've protected. So it's hard, you know, a lot of things actually you fill in a blank and it feeds right into the next screen. We're working on, and I think we'll have it done today, a much simpler version of this that would they could print out as a PDF to at least capture, you know, a budget. You know, cash flow projection is just a beefed up budget. It includes a line that says how much money do I actually have given all these transactions that have happened. And so it just is, it has another line to a budget that says, what's my actual cash position? The mantra is like, when we're out of cash, we're out of business typically. And by doing this cash flow projection, again, we're trying to be proactive in identifying if they have any gaps. And so you can see where, I know it sounds complicated to try to forecast labor costs, but it's so needed because that's our biggest expense. And things have kind of changed with how we're calculating it. And so it will give them confidence of finance. It will reduce a lot of stress if they just have a more confident feeling about what's happening financially. And it will tell them what's next, what they need to do next. And they may need to seek additional funding like we have in the guide on step 3. And so if you know, the first section here, hopefully you can see my cursor, it says for providers who are open or closed, if they need help retaining staff and or making mortgage, lease, and utility payments, it takes them right to the SBA emergency loan programs as something to consider. Once they've done that application and figured out what's going on there, and I've got so many papers, I think it's good for you all to be aware of the timelines on this stuff. It's, you know, originally, you know, with the EIDL, the grant portion, they were like, that's going to be ready in 3 days. And you can apply for it and you'll have that money in 3 days. That's not what happened. What really happened is you apply for it, and then once they've received it and it's processed, you can expect it in 3 days. So providers were probably waiting a week, you know, 2 weeks before they actually got that emergency grant. And then, you know, there's a 3 to 4 week window of when it's, you know, from application to when they're actually receiving this. And so from a timing perspective, I think it's good to kind of caution them that there's some, it's not a fast turnaround. If they're self-employed or they have staff and they, you know, you've heard every scenario, you know, I've had to lay people off, I've furloughed people, I've reduced hours. I'm trying to maintain payroll. You've heard every scenario. And so again, all the scenarios are laid out here, and it tells you which direction to go in. And so this green section is all about the paid leave requirements, which, there's a cost to that, and they have to be aware of that. It falls into their strategy, and if they can't afford to give someone off 80 hours, 2 weeks, because they've become exposed to the virus, they need to be proactive then in what they're going to do. And I'm not an attorney or a tax professional. I'm not going to segue into areas that would be giving advice. And then you'll see here the purple section, if they've had to furlough, or they're not paying, or they've had to lay people back or cut hours, it takes them into the unemployment. And then again, we mentioned the student loan suspension, which could be another benefit to staff. Once we've looked at all these, if there's still gaps based on the cash flow, that's when we've got to look at and get creative with other funding streams. So this next slide talks about that. What would we do if there's still a gap, or they didn't get the PPP in time, or the EIDL in time? What I've been encouraging is we've got to find a way. And by, again, getting it down on paper, we start to know exactly what we're looking for, how much money, where is the gap, and when is the gap. I think the timing is also important. The lender I was talking to this morning, he's suggesting that revenue will probably be throughout the summer at about 50% of what businesses are used to. And again, I think we've got to start preparing our businesses that it most likely won't go to 100% capacity if that's where you were at before. You've got to start being realistic about what the revenue is going to look like come June, July, August, September, and fill those gaps. There are a lot of things happening, and I'm encouraging everyone to stay in touch with your local economic development departments, because those folks, and also your chambers of commerce, they are really stepping up and being a place to hold that information about local and even national, state level funding opportunities. And one came through, and I put it on the website, from the U.S. Chamber, and they've got a small business grant program of up to $5,000. And you'll see things like it would be, I think, worth having someone in your community keeping an eye on those economic developments, connecting with them, and making sure our providers know about any funding opportunities, any grants, any really favorable loan programs. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there. And what we're seeing is they go quick. So the more that they can be prepared with their financial information and ready to respond, they have more potential to grab that stuff. A lot of communities have had supply drives and working to ensure that providers have basic essential materials that all the stores have been running out of, hand sanitizers, that kind of stuff. There's also other options, for those independent business owners. They may have not have thought of this. I hate that we have to think about these things, but it's pretty easy to get a home equity loan. The IRS has lowered the restrictions. If someone had to pull money from their retirement accounts, there's no penalties like there normally would be. And then we should not forget about the Virginia Small Business Financing Authority's Child Care Loan Program. And that's been in existence for quite some time. It's an underutilized loan program. And for the COVID-19 crisis, they have lowered the interest rate to 0%. For existing, folks that already have a loan with them, but also for new applicants. They've also extended who can apply. Every type of business model pretty much can apply for this. And all the details, again, are on our website. We have links to it. You can also go to their website where the application is. The big thing about this loan program is proceeds have to be used to purchase tangible items. And So they can't really use it for working capital. You have to buy something that you can touch and feel. And, so there's those requirements like mulch, playground equipment, cots, cribs, mats. If someone's now caring for school-age children, maybe they have to buy new things to accommodate, the school-age kids. And so it's just another piece of the strategy that may fill that gap. So next steps, kind of bring it like Kathy just did. Let's bring it all back together. We want them to get a plan together right away. We've said it 1,000 times, but CCDF funding and getting ready for the disaster loan programs through the SBA. Encouraging them to commit to a cash flow projection. Faith-based programs are really good at budgets. They usually have one because it's required. Your independent operators rarely have budgets, but this would be a time to take the time to do a budget. Get the funding in place, fill the gaps. Encourage them to have somebody, whether it's their husband, another employee, someone looking at business financial supports, looking for grants, paying attention to economic development, to your community, paying attention to what's out there. And this was a suggestion from Virginia. It's really smart, is stay in touch with families, even if they're not attending right now. Secure your current customer base so that when the restrictions lift, we know who's intending to come back and what that means for our business model, for our revenues. And staying connected to families, I think, is really essential in that, even from a marketing perspective, it's going to strengthen the relationship, and they know that we're in this together, and that even if they're not attending, you still are their, childcare provider, very much connected. And we'll have more trainings. There's going to be a rebuilding strategy over the next, probably for quite some time. I think things are going to look a little different, not just for our industry, but really for how parents work, what the demand is. We're really encouraging centers to start being innovative and adjusting to the market needs. Just like now we know that all these school-age children are out there, and if you're getting calls from parents who need school-age care, how can we I would be open to, all right, I'm opening up a school-age classroom, because that is revenue, and that's what the market needs right now. So really encouraging them to be flexible. I've been on a lot of webinars, or calls, community calls lately. When you think about essential personnel, healthcare workers, they work shift work. They work till 7. They work sometimes in the middle of the night. And can we start being creative about how we offer care? Parents may be working part-time. They may not be able to get back to work full-time as before. So we may have to adjust and offer part-time, flexible hours. And I think we've just got to encourage them to be flexible. Also, this downtime, once we get everything else done, our forecast is also a good time to really look at the business and the way they operate, their paperwork. So often we're all so busy, and this industry is caregivers, teachers, and so often the business kind of management and practices, it gets kind of pushed to the side. But I think we're realizing, like, this would be, it's important, and this would be a good time to beef up your documentation, review handbooks, make sure we have job descriptions, look at the way we operate, look at ways we can do things better, and look for opportunities to automate, to streamline, to get familiar with marketing online. This would be the time to, update websites. Hopefully they have a website. This would be a time to establish one, to establish your Google for Business, to get more comfortable with the social media. That's really our #1 marketing tool. And we still have a lot of providers that are reluctant to get on social media, but it's where the customers are at. It's where these young parents are at. And it's a great way to connect with them, but also to reach new customers. This would be, yes.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt. I have a little bit of information I want to share, and then just also remind us we've got 20 minutes left to complete and to hear Q&A. I had reached out to Tara Ragland. This is how real time this training is, to try to get an answer to Julie's earlier question. And she also let me know, just as we're texting, that they're receiving a lot of incomplete applications for the new CCDF dollars. And so I think this really affirms what you're saying, Lauren, that providers really need to be ready and have their paperwork together and have, done their homework, and we can all help them with that. I asked her, they're putting together a draft piece of guidance to try to help address the issues that they're finding with incomplete applications. And I asked her if there's anything that I could share today with you all about what they're finding that would help point us in the right direction. And she said several things. One, they're sending multiple emails as part of the same application, and the emails could be quite far apart in terms of timing, and it's very hard for DSS to then match up all the different emails that are part of the same application. So we really want to make sure that they're submitting a complete application at once. They're not sending in all that's required, not checking all the required boxes. They need to have the Virginia W-9, not the federal, and the Virginia W-9 form has the state seal, which is something that we can watch for.
Oh,
Also,
the Virginia W-9, okay.
If folks have surrendered their license, they will need to reapply for licensure. And last tip that she has sent just now is that corporations need to make sure that each individual entity or site is applying separately. So just a few tips, and again, just all kind of going to this need for all of us to be as ready as possible with helping point to very specific steps and pieces to be able to successfully apply. Again, top priority this week is applying for those CCDF stimulus dollars that Virginia has in hand, and doing so quickly, but also thoughtfully enough that one application does the trick and submits everything needed so that they can then, more quickly get the cash. Thanks.
So if they have multiple sites, each site would submit a separate application, even if they have, okay.
If it's a corporation, they need to make sure that each individual entity is applying separately.
And that's why that ask line is so helpful. Rather than submitting an incomplete application, ask, they'll get back right away and make sure that they understand what they're doing.
Yes, and I mean, I just have to, give Tara credit for the fact that she's answering my text messages in real time and providing this information is just a really admirable show from the agency that they're doing all they can to make this feasible for providers.
I know, they really are. They're amazing. This last little section, just a few more things we wanted to share, and then we'll just, again, have a little time for Q&A. We put together a strategic planning worksheet, and this is on the website as downloadable. Anita has probably put the link to it in the chat box, and it just simplifies. I don't know about you all, but sometimes you just have to go, okay, what are our next steps? We went through the guide. Now, how do we process this? What are the next steps? So this might help them to kind of think about what is next, what documents do I need, how do I prepare for what comes next, what loan programs, and then, any follow-up stuff. And this slide just shows you what page of the guide applies to each step of the planning worksheet. And then lastly, we mentioned the website, and you got to see how it's broken down. Everything we talked about today is on there. We're also archiving webinars, all the webinars that the VECF has done the last 2 weeks are on there, as well as we have some industry experts that you may have heard of. Tom Copeland, who does webinars for the National Association of Family Child Care Centers, has done just some really incredible webinars for family day homes. So we're linking to that. Hinge Brokers have done really great webinars. We've got a link to that. And I know there's a ton of them out there. I think it's all good. It's all good. We're all beefing up our knowledge and skills because this is what we need to do right now. If you get, I think it's important, and it's on here, the Virginia SBDC network. The Small Business Development Center is it's a national network, but we have them throughout our state. They're business counselors who are experienced and trained in navigating and asking questions around really all topics related to small business. But right now they are the advising arm of the SBA and are able and equipped to answer any detailed questions that you all or your clients would have on any of these SBA loan programs. Their number one question is always about small business lending. And so we've put the link there to the virginiasbdc.org website so you can find, if needed, an office near you. There's also, you may have heard of SCORE. That is the counterpart of the SBDC. They're also a counseling arm of the SBA. They have offices throughout the state. And then in some communities, we have women's business outreach centers. And again, they're equipped to help with these SBA loan programs. So with that, I think that's it, but we can answer questions.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Lots of great information. I just sent a note. If folks have comments or suggestions or questions, we have just a few more minutes to see if we can answer those. Also, we are looking for where the Virginia W-9 form can be downloaded from. And Lauren, I imagine once we ascertain the correct place for that, we can ask you to upload that to your website and make that clear for folks so that we can hopefully make that step a little bit easier for folks. Oh, and it looks like Virginia, thank you, typed in the website where to get the Virginia W-9.
Good.
Thank you for that. Federal W-9 still needed for payroll protection plan and EIDL. I'm assuming so.
The payroll protection, again, every bank is going to have different requirements.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to want they'll want some proof, that you have a tax ID number. Mm-hmm. Typically, it's an EIN letter, it's documentation that shows that, mm-hmm. or Social Security number.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. And, again, we'll try to keep our eye on the ball when the new stimulus comes forward, because we're assuming the same vehicle and the same requirements will apply. But in fact, there could be some changes. And in fact, we've been pushing for some changes to make the barrier for child care providers lower, the barrier to entry to apply. But we'll definitely keep y'all posted on that. But it is true that there's so many variations depending on the lender and the lender's own rules and application requirements. Lauren, another question. I have one center in mind where the directors are the only non-teaching staff left in the centers. Do you have any suggestions how they could balance that with how to get the finance side the attention it needs.
Oh, so they're working all day, it sounds like. So they have no teaching staff and they're providing care for children all day, and they still have this added stress of getting all this financial stuff together. I mean, I think that when we hear the word vulnerable business, that to me is a vulnerable situation to be in. And I would say help as much as you can and just try to encourage them to realize how important that even though they're exhausted at the end of the day, they can apply for this CCDF funding. They're an open provider, and that will alleviate a lot of stress to get that money in and perhaps enable them to bring some more folks back on. So it actually may give them what it's intended, immediate relief.
Thank you, Lauren. And she's clarified they do have teachers, but no cook or janitors or other support staff. So the directors are just wearing a good many hats. And again, I would just say, let's just utilize the great information that Lauren and Virginia are able to bring forward to really facilitate the process so that we're, kind of peeling away some of the layers of complexity so that they can get right to the job of applying for some of these, relief funds.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions that you all have today? Can you give us a sense of what you're hearing from providers or what additional tools or guidance or information we can help you with so that you're better equipped to support them?
I think, Kathy, we will add to the website at least, knowing that every lender is different in what they're asking for, the common documents that they're asking for. So how to be prepared to work with the lender. And then, and it's what you might typically think. They're going to want to see tax returns, financial statements, business financial statements. So a balance sheet, a profit and loss statement, this detailed record of payroll cost. And each bank has an application, they have the application for it. There may be a payroll calculator. And just, again, I know for some folks it may be overwhelming, but it's the reality that, they are a business and they have to get comfortable with the language of business, especially if they're going to be able to successfully apply for these loans and these programs.
Thank you, Lauren.
Lauren, I think an important thing for providers to understand as well is the importance of documentation. All the things that you set up, having payroll reports and financial information when they're trying to submit back to, say, the PPP lender in determining the percentage of forgiveness, they're going to want to see detailed records. So if they don't have a business specific account, now might be the time to do that, so that they've really isolated those funds and can show exactly what those funds have been used for. That's going to be a primary importance.
Thank you. And I'll just say, Lauren and Virginia, y'all are getting some wonderful thanks and appreciation in the comments. I think, probably, most important thing that we want to take away from this training or have you all leave with is the importance of and the, kind of awesome responsibility of using the guide just to help providers with their own thought process and decision making about, using that decision matrix about open or close and sort of what operational decisions they should make. And then also to connect them once they've made that decision, how can we connect them immediately to the resources that they need to kind of keep the lights on and to do what they need to do to be able to offer the care or be ready to reopen once we've passed this storm. I want to just, before we close, let you know how much we appreciate your attendance today. The questions that you've asked are really helpful to us to inform us about what additional trainings or tools we want to make sure and provide. We hope you'll take just a minute to complete this feedback survey that will again help us do a better job and continue to provide good resources for you and for our providers. And we'll continue to keep you informed. And as this situation evolves and changes, and as more information is available, we are committed to making sure that we put that into your hands and that we can pass that along to our amazing providers. Any last burning questions before we wrap up today? Again, Lauren and Virginia, just thanks to you. Wonderful job keeping us up to date so they can support providers. Thank you for that. And we appreciate your time today. Thanks to Lauren and Virginia. Thanks to the team at VECF who are working behind the scenes here. And best of luck to all of you. And this is a conversation that will continue. Thanks to all.
Thank you.